Warning, this video contains spoilers up to chapter 1090 of the One Piece manga. If you don't want to be spoiled, now's the time to turn back. So MatPat made a theory about One Piece, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush, it is filled with misinformation. Not about the actual science in the video. The science, for all I can make out, is pretty solid. No, the misinformation is about the world of One Piece itself. Now, I am a fan of MatPat, but as someone who has watched all the episodes and read all the chapters of One Piece, oh boy, this one hurts. Good thing MatPat doesn't actually have a devil fruit power because he jumped right into the deep end of the water with this one, and apparently nobody was there to help him. I'm gonna go through the entire video from end to end, and I'm gonna point out the flaws, of which there are, unfortunately, many. After the intro, the first flaw comes just over a minute into the video. Not really a mistake, but it chooses to use a dubbed clip of Gold Roger's speech. This is a problem because the dub is infamous for translating things that don't convey the proper meaning that it was supposed to in Japanese. So already using this as part of the video makes me very uneasy, because if MatPat uses the dubbed version to get his information, he may be basing his information on translation errors. But I admit, this is a minor issue. It's clearly easier for editing and just reaching a general audience, so not a big deal as such, and he does later use another dubbed clip of Whitebeard saying the One Piece is real, but that's just a meme in the One Piece community and not really a problem. But the second mistake I'll point out, which is also arguably minor, gave me some bigger red flags. MatPat says in his video that there is no sign that One Piece will be stopping anytime soon. And this is a problem because this clearly gives away that MatPat is not on top of his One Piece news. Because for months now we've known that One Piece is actually in its final saga. And Oda, the creator of One Piece, has estimated that it would last 3 to 5 years roughly. Though we are talking about a manga that was estimated to last for about 5 years originally from end to end, so here we are 2 decades later and we're still going. So I wouldn't put too much stock into this, but we know that this is the final stretch. The end of One Piece is indeed in sight, and most likely it will happen within this decade. So yeah, already not knowing this piece of information, which is well known by all One Piece fans, it shows a lack of research and quality control, which is worrying for the rest of the video. And as we get into the proper meat of this video, my fears are unfortunately only confirmed. At about the 4-minute mark, MatPat talks about how the world of One Piece would likely have a water shortage. The basic argument goes that since the world of One Piece is covered in mostly ocean water, there would be less fresh water. Arguing that, hey, we on this planet with about 70% of it covered in ocean water already have shortages ourselves, and so a planet with 90% of it covered in ocean water would clearly have a shortage. But that's ignoring that less land means less space to live, meaning that there are less people. And from what we've seen, even large nations in One Piece are pretty small compared to the nations of the real world. The biggest nation we know about in the world of One Piece is Alabasta. In what is essentially a Q&A section of the manga volumes where Oda answers questions, he does state that Alabasta has about 10 million people. With this being the largest number of inhabitants for a single nation that we know about, this means that it's most likely that not a lot of nations are going to be much bigger than this. By comparison, of the roughly 200 countries in the real world, depending on how you count, over 90 have a population of over 10 million. So 10 million in the real world is like a middle country, but in the world of One Piece, that's massive! Like in the real world, there are 15 countries with over 100 million people. One Piece doesn't have anything like that as far as we know. And while it's hard to estimate anything about a world where a lot of it is still unknown to us, I'd say that even estimating the population of One Piece to be at 1 billion is far overestimating it. And throughout One Piece we really haven't seen any water shortages. Although I guess saying that we don't see it in the series doesn't really count because MatPat is trying to apply real-world science to a fictional world, and so what happens in the series isn't important, it's what happens if we actually try to apply logic to it. The point is that despite that, we have less people to supply with fresh water, and so we need less of it. And so I don't think there's a good case to say that there's a shortage. After talking about water shortages, he talks a little bit about how there would be less farmland, so people would be fighting over food. But again, less people means we need less food. But most importantly, I think MatPat forgot that fishing is something you can do. Because the world is covered in ocean. And what lives in the ocean? A lot of fish. Fish that can be food. And so suddenly that lack of farmland just shouldn't matter because everybody's fishing. You're feasting on fish. And next up comes an interesting point because MatPat talks about the red line. Specifically, he talks about how it would prevent humid air from passing over it and thus create what's called a rain shadow. As a result, he claims that the eastern side of the red line would be very dry and the not eastern side would be very humid. This is because the Grand Line and the current shown go from west to east. But while the theory video shows this, it also shows that he's forgotten a very crucial thing, a very basic piece of geography. The world is round. In his visual aid, he shows the classic One Piece globe, with helpful arrows showing the currents going from Reverse Mountain, that's the center of the map intersecting the Red Line and the Grand Line, and going around the world all the way back to the other side of Reverse Mountain where it would stop, and so no humid air would get over there and it would all be dry. Except that's not how it would happen in this case, because as MatPat himself states in the video, the Red Line circumnavigates the globe. So on the backside of the planet, the part of the globe obscured to us, there is another part of the red line blocking the currents, meaning that the other side of that part of the red line should also be dry, which is the side he believes should be lush and full of rain. The visual aid makes it seem logical, but only if you forget that the red line intersects at 2 points of the Grand Line, not just one. What's far more likely is that each of the halves of the planet that the red line cuts off have their own ecosystem, with self-contained currents and weather systems. Now this would likely have a whole nother effect on the world of One Piece that would be very interesting to analyze, but it wouldn't be the way MatPat says it would be. Besides, in a world with vertical ocean currents, rain made of lightning, and islands floating above a massive chasm where there is always sunshine and daylight, I don't think it would make the world of One Piece any weirder. And this whole thing gets a little bit worse actually when he talks about the calm belt. During this he says that because of the red line, the eastern and western hemispheres don't share water. Which is probably correct. But I think MatPat forgot that he mentioned that the air currents would go all the way around and to the back of the red line and there it would stop. So for the air, he forgot that the red line was there, and then he remembered that it was there for the ocean currents and just kind of blocked it. So it goes against what he said previously, and so it falls apart. It's a sad thing because, like I said, the calm belt points he makes actually make sense. Having ocean currents that work in the way that the One Piece world shows would probably be catastrophic in many ways. But are things going all the way around, or do they stop at the halfway point? Honestly, I think this is very embarrassing for MatPat. Again, I like the guy and I don't think he's getting things wrong on purpose, but didn't he have anyone to consult with or collab with in order to make sure that things were correct and quality checked? Anyway, moving on, as a result of the calm belt and the red line, MatPat claims that each of the blue seas would essentially be their own enclosed systems, which is probably correct in some ways. But then he goes on to claim that it would create a temperature problem, claiming that the sun gives more heat to equator, which is the Grand Line, which would create a whole lot of warm water in the Grand Line, which would be trapped in between the calm belt and not be shared with any of the other oceans, making them essentially freeze over. But again, there is a problem, and this one is pretty big and shows that he hasn't done due diligence. The Grand Line is not the equator of One Piece. In a panel from chapter 1056, which was released almost exactly 1 year ago, so if he had consulted with someone who reads the manga he might have known this, the Grand Line is shown in relation to a compass. Notice anything? The compass is at a 45-degree angle, meaning the red line and Grand Line are not running horizontally and vertically in the world along the equator and a meridian. They are in fact running diagonally. This alone invalidates a lot of what MatPat has already talked about.
A wide ocean stream that wraps around the entire equator of the planet.
And given the information that the heat gives more sun to the equator, this actually means that the Grand Line would get a grand sum total of very little of it. I actually found a very good way to explain this visually, courtesy of the Dark Side of Snow on Reddit. So here we have what many people, not just MatPat, assumed prior to seeing this. However, here we have the world as it must actually be if this panel is correct. And here is how it would look on a Mercator projection. Here's the equator, and it's not following the Grand Line at all. That said, this could still have massive implications for the weather in One Piece, just not the way MatPat explains it. Maybe the North and Blue Seas are pretty cold while East and West aren't. Finally, to close out the video, MatPat can't seem to help himself but make one more wrong assumption. He claims that due to the extreme weather and lack of resources, which, as we have discussed, is already on shaky ground and probably wrong, the technology of the world just wouldn't be able to progress beyond its current point. That would be because it's too hard to do scientific research in these conditions. And this is just so wrong. For a long time in the series, we've known about ancient weapons that are more powerful than anything the world of One Piece currently has, which already hinted at great technology in the past. And then he goes on to claim that the world of One Piece is in a technological stage similar to the Industrial Revolution. Now, I'm not saying that's not right in the majority of what we see, but no technological advances beyond that? Say that to this tribe using literal flame bazookas, or this army of cyborgs, or this other army of clones. And that's just scratching the surface. The world of One Piece is filled with futuristic tech that belongs in a space sci-fi. And you may be asking, well then, why isn't all of the One Piece world filled with such technology? For one thing, a lot of the islands in One Piece are pretty much cut off from the rest of the world, due to distance, location, the sea being filled with sea monsters, etc. As a result, there isn't really a lot of cross-contamination as far as culture and technology is concerned. And second, and maybe more importantly, it has recently been stated blatantly in the manga that technology from 800 years ago in the One Piece world was far superior. So why isn't it like that now? I'll give you the absolute shortest version I can. In short, there was a kingdom with very advanced technology. A lot of nations teamed up to do a war against the kingdom lost. The winning nations formed what is now known as the world government, which has existed for 800 years. And this world government has done their very best to keep technological advances in check, with the exception of whatever they find beneficial to themselves, like advanced weaponry. Now, there is a lot of detail to this, but it does outright disprove that the technology of One Piece can't progress past its current point. And at the end of the video, MatPat goes on to claim that the reason so many people are leaving and doing pirate life is because they are leaving their resource-starved islands in search of something better, and that's what we see happening in the show. Which, no. Just no. It might be true for some, but it is not what we see in the majority of cases. People set out to sea to fulfill their dreams, to find treasure, and that's despite having pretty nice homes. Luffy's village was pretty idyllic. Chopper's home island, while being in perpetual winter, seemed to be pretty prosperous, depending on the ruler of course, but that's another matter. Robin's home island of Ohara seemed pretty nice, until it got blown up by the government, but that's not a weather phenomenon. And Jinbei's home is literally 10,000 meters below the surface of the ocean. And it's still possible to live there, even for normal humans. One Piece is just a world where many people want to go on adventures. In fact, most of the Straw Hat Pirates, our main characters, could have just settled down and lived peacefully where they're from. Things might not have been perfect, but they weren't apocalyptic wastelands without natural resources. And honestly, the worst things that happened to any of these places were a result of political intrigue and had nothing to do with weather phenomenon. So in conclusion, I unfortunately have to say that I'm pretty disappointed at MatPat. I never thought I'd see a One Piece theory on any of his channels, and honestly, I didn't mind. It's just so much to take in, and I figured that it's probably not worth his time. And apparently MatPat also thought it wasn't worth his time, because he didn't take the time to verify any information, consult with or collab with someone who knows more about One Piece, and just do what he could to quality control the information he put into the video. That said, these are obviously all innocent mistakes. With the live action series coming out, MatPat clearly wanted to do a One Piece video while it was still relevant. But he took on something that was way over his head, didn't do his due diligence, and as a result, he just made a lot of mistakes. But it's just a fictional world. Even me making this video is probably a bit of an overreaction. And all in all, this video doesn't really impact anything important. But I know MatPat likes being thorough, and this theory just doesn't pass quality control. I guess that's what happens when you make a video on a series that shows no sign of stopping. But hey, that's just some critique. Hopefully constructive critique. Thanks for watching.